Hello, students. We are moving on to the next chapter of our syllabus of microeconomics. Today, we're going to talk about market structures. Now, why is market structures important for us to study in economics? Because market structures will tell you about the types of competitions that dwell in an economy. Okay, there could be different types of competitions that a product or a service might be facing. You need to know all these types of competitions because it is one of the most important element of economics. Now, if you talk about in simple words what is the meaning of market, I would say that the term market refers not necessarily to a place but always to a commodity and the buyers and the sellers who are in direct competition with one another. Okay, so when you're talking about a market, you need not really think of a place where there is a buyer and a seller who is exchanging product and or services for a particular price. Rather, it could be any these days you could also see virtual markets, which means you could see sellers and buyers meeting online. Okay, there is an online sale that is happening with the help of e-commerce sites and all. So it is not always a place uh, to where a commodity is sold. Okay, and it could be virtual, it could be rather a place. So this is what market is all about. Okay, now what are the features of market? There are some major characteristics of market that we need to know. One is that it is restricted to one area. Okay, so whenever you talk about market, you either say that Pune region is a market for my product, or you would say that Maharashtra is a market for my product, or India is a market for my product, or you would say the world is a market for my product. So you are restricting yourself to one area. Next is you can sell one commodity or you can sell multiple commodities in a market. All right, then you are selling the products for price. Okay, you will not sell your products free of cost. You are going to charge a particular price for your product. Now that depends upon what price you want to keep it. You want to place it at a low price, you want to place it at a high price. It all depends upon the seller. Then there are something called as buyers and sellers. There should be a seller, there should be a buyer. That's how you can complete the definition of market. Competition, yes, there could be competition for your products. It could be severe, it could be moderate, or it could be no competition. Okay, but the word competition is there because when you talk about market, there could be markets where there are many sellers selling the similar products, or there are few sellers selling a product. Okay, then there is a close contact with your customers, or it could be either it could be a contact where you're meeting the customers physically, or you are meeting the customers through an online medium. So that is close contact. So these are certain features of market. Now, my dear students, we come on to a very important part of this chapter, which I would say is the heart of the chapter, because you are going to talk about the four types of firms. There are four types of firms. One is, or you can say that there are four types of competition. One is monopoly, oligopoly, monopolistic, and perfect. In economics, we start with perfect competition, then we say monopoly, then we say monopolistic, and then we say oligopoly. Now, what is the meaning of perfect competition? Perfect competition means where there are n number of sellers, where there are many sellers and many buyers selling the same type of products. Okay, some of the features of this type of competition, would I would say, is that they sell the similar type of products. There is no barrier to entry or exit, which means any seller can enter easily in the market and exit out of the market. There are many customers buying these products. There is no government intervention, which means the government does not involve himself at all. okay, then there is no transportation cost. So because of these two features in the end, which I said, that is no government intervention and no transportation cost, you do not get to see this type of competition in a real life. Okay, so we get to see the other three types of competitions, which is monopolistic, oligopoly, monopoly. For your information, there is another type of competition which is called as pure competition. So pure competition has all the features of perfect competition, just that it does not have the feature of no government intervention and no transportation cost, because of which we get to see pure competition. So let me give you an example of pure competition. When you're buying vegetables like onions, potatoes and all, you see that there are n number of sellers selling the similar product, and there are many buyers buying this product, right? So this is an example of pure competition. Let us see what is monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is where you get to see differentiated products. Okay, say for example, I take here I have given the examples of movies, novels and restaurants. Over here also you get to see many buyers. The second feature of monopolistic is you get to see differentiated products. Okay, so for example, in movies you get to see differentiated movies. How some could be thriller, some could be horror, some could be romantic movies. So this is how they are differentiating movies. Then there is restaurants. How do restaurants differentiate? They differentiate with the kind of quality of products that they are serving, with the service that they are giving, right? So this is how they are differentiating themselves. And when differentiating factor comes into picture, obviously you know that the pricing also changes, right? So monopolistic, you get to see many buyers, okay, many sellers, but selling differentiated products. So examples would be movies, novels and restaurants. Next is monopoly. Monopoly means single seller. Always remember, mono means single seller. Now, what is single seller? Single seller means a person who is the only one who is selling in the entire economy. Say, for example, railways. Are we, even if Ambani has a lot of money, is he allowed to give railway service to us? No. The entire resources or the entire authority responsibility is in the hands of the government. So only the government can provide us with the railway services, right? So that is monopoly. So whatever they want to charge, they can charge because there's a single seller. Let's take an example. Someone has Virat Kohli's bat, okay, the bat where he scored 100 runs. Now this is a unique product, okay, not everybody is going to have Virat Kohli's bat. So the seller might charge any price that he wishes to. Why? Because he has the entire resource in his hands. So whatever price he wants to charge, he can charge. So monopoly guys, or the single sellers have the liberty to charge whatever price they want to. All right. Next is oligopoly. Oligopoly means few sellers. Always remember, oligopoly, few sellers. So there are a very few sellers. Why? Because the kind of investment which these products require are very high. That's why we get to see few sellers. Let's take an example, airlines. So airlines, maybe 200 crores is the investments. Not everybody has 200 crores, so not everyone can enter in the market. Like monopolistic competition, say for example, soaps, anybody can enter the market because soaps does not require much investment. But in case of airlines, you require high investment. That's why we get to see few sellers. All right, so there are few sellers. Then examples I have given you is that airlines, mass media, computers, oil and gas and cars. Even in computer firms you get to see very few. Whenever you can name the firms on your fingertips, that would be oligopoly. When you cannot name them on your fingertips, that means there are many. That's monopolistic. That's the major difference between the two. All right, so I hope this makes sense to you all. What is monopoly, what is monopolistic, what is oligopoly, and what is perfect competition? You have to remember this. How do we determine the price under perfect competition? Like I told you, perfect competition does not exist because of its certain characteristics. The price determination is with the help of the demand and supply curve. So the demand and supply curve will intersect each other, and the price which is set with the help of demand and supply would be the equilibrium price. That is the price at which these sellers will sell the products. So the demand for potatoes and the supply for potatoes will decide upon the price of potatoes, and that is the price which everybody will sell at. Okay, so if you go to enter, say for example you are at MG Road Market, you will see MG Road Market, everyone selling the potatoes at a same price, that is 20 rupees kg. Nobody will be there who will sell it at 50 rupees kg. He will be called as a fool, because there are n number of sellers selling the same product. Okay, so if you see the price, the demand curve, the average revenue curve, and the marginal revenue curve is all the same in perfect competition. It is an horizontal line parallel to the x-axis. Okay. Now, price determination under perfect competition in the long run. That was in the short run. The demand and supply sets the price. In the long run, whatever is the long run marginal cost curve and the long run average cost curve will help you to decide the price. So if you see over here the point, okay, at G, where AR is equals to MR is equals to price, or where at point F, where AR is equals to MR is equals to price. So this would be the price in the long run. So in the long run marginal cost curve and the long run average cost curve will help us to decide the price. Okay. Now, how is the short run equilibrium of the industry? If you see the short run equilibrium of the industry, you see the demand and supply curve is setting the price, which is point E, that is the equilibrium price. Okay, in the second case, you see this is about the profits. Okay, the high profits that the firm is making. So the shaded area is the profit that the firm is making, and the next that you're seeing, the shaded area above the price, is the uh, profits that the firm is making. So in this case, in the case B, there are not much profits but that the firm makes, but in case C, the firm is making very high profits. All right. Okay, now let us see equilibrium under monopoly market. If you see equilibrium under monopoly market, you have to majorly talk about these four curves: marginal cost curve, average cost curve, average revenue curve, and marginal revenue curve. Okay, with the help of these curves, you can decide upon the equilibrium value, right? So if you see in the first one, you see point E. Point E is where MC is equals to MR. So when MC is equals to MR, that is the high profit, or I would say that is the equilibrium point which every firm would desire to, because the firm has the least cost and the firm has the highest profit. So E over here that you see is the equilibrium output and the equilibrium price, or the equilibrium point that the firm has got. Okay, when MC is equals to MR. In the second case, when equilibrium under constant cost, if the costs are constant, then you get to see that AC is equals to MC. Okay, that means your average cost curve and your marginal cost curve, when they both become equal, that is equilibrium under constant cost. And the third one is equilibrium under falling cost, if your costs are falling. So you see the point E that you have got is below, right? It is at down. So this is the equilibrium point. So this was under monopoly market. Monopoly market means when the prices are different and the seller is only one. Okay, so the seller has the liberty to charge different prices to different customers. Now, equilibrium under monopolistic competition. In monopolistic competition, you see that this is one curve, and the other one, you have a curve on the right hand side and on the left hand side. Let's talk about the left hand side curve first. If you're talking about the left hand side, here it is given in USD. Okay, or you can say it is rupees. So that's your assumption. So on y axis you have rupees. Okay, that's the price. On x axis you have the quantity. Okay, so if you see this equilibrium is formed over here, that is PAC. Okay, this shaded area, the pi SR shaded area, is the equilibrium. Okay, and over here if you see, in long run equilibrium is where your MC is cutting the MR curve. Okay, that is below, that is the equilibrium quantity. Okay, so this is it. Now, what is duopoly? Duopoly is nothing but where there are only two firms. Okay, they are selling identical products. Product differentiation is not necessary because there are only two firms. There's a lot of uncertainty, okay, in terms of the products, in terms of whether there will be demand for the products or no. And there is interdependence, which means if there are only two firms in the market, one firm would rely on the other firm for its decisions. The other firm would rely on the first firm on its decision. So there is the both the firms are relying on each other, so that is called as interdependence. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the market structures chapter. I will just quickly take you through to the next chapter that we are going to do, is that is welfare economics. All right, now what is welfare economics? As the name suggests, welfare. Okay, welfare means the betterment of the people of the economy. Okay, so it is a branch of economics dealing with human welfare. Okay, and defining wealth and establishment of guides for the social policy aims at maximizing of total individual utilities. Like you have studied in the last sem, in the previous sem you've studied that a customer is happy when he is getting the highest utility. All right, so the customers will buy those many products which are giving him the highest utility. So welfare economics is nothing but it deals with where the individual are getting utilities from different products. They have proper wealth. Okay, the social policies, whatever policies the government has framed, or the authority has framed, are for the betterment of the people. So that is the definition of welfare. Okay, what is the scope of welfare? So in scope of welfare, one, you have to understand that it is economic and non-economic welfare. When you talk about economic welfare deals with money. Okay, so anything related to money, if there is sufficient money with the people, that is the standard of living of people is good, they have good income, so that is economic. Non-economic would be something which is not related to money. So there is good hygiene factors in the economy, proper hospitals, proper educational institutions, all that would be related to non-economic welfare. Both positive and normative. Positive means what ought to be, normative is what is. Okay, so what should be ideally, uh, there should be full employment in an economy, so that is positive. Normative would be there is full employment in an economy, or there is sufficient educational institutions in an economy. That's normative study. Okay, individual welfare as well as social welfare. Individual means when you're dealing with one person, so one person's welfare would be considered as individual welfare, and social welfare is for the society's welfare. Now, you have to understand a function which is called as social welfare functions. Social welfare function is a sort of social indifference map. Okay, so you must have already studied about individual indifference map. This is a social indifference map consisting of social difference curves. Okay, so there are different curves, social difference curves, and SIC gives various combination of utilities of the two individuals that comprise the society, that result in the same level of social welfare. So we are considering here two individuals. One indifference curve is of one individual. So if there are multiple, that means those many individuals are there, or you can say that it is one society. So one indifference curve is replicating one society. Okay, the welfare of one society. To show that diagrammatically, let's denote the utilities of the consumers by U1 and U2. Okay, so for example, if you see this graph over here, U1 on y-axis, U1 on x-axis, and U2 on y-axis. Okay, so this is utility 1 and utility 2. So utility 1 from a product, utility 2 from a product, for example, and W1 would be the welfare of a society, W2 would be the welfare of a society that they are getting. Now W2 obviously is at a right hand side, which means W2 is better than W1. W1 society, or you would say the welfare of the W1 is less than W2. W2 is greater than W1. Okay, so every individual or every society would always try to achieve higher and higher of welfare. So just let me quickly tell you what is written over here. If if at the initial U1 U2 combination both the individuals or any one of them are made better off, the utility level of the other remaining the same, that would result to a higher level of W, and the society would move to achieve higher SIC. SIC is nothing but social indifference curve. Okay, let us note that SIC needs to be convex or concave to the origin, for there is no rule that UI increases and UI2 would fall at diminishing or increasing rate. Like in indifference curve, you must have studied that one indifference curve increases, the other would fall. But in this case, it is not like that. That's why we don't say that it is either convex or concave to the origin. Okay, next is, once we formulate the SWF and SIC, we are well equipped to compare different policies and find out policies that maximize social welfare subject to available economic resources. So depending upon whatever economic resources we have, we will formulate such policies that will give us the highest welfare. Okay, so that is about social welfare function. Now, next that we talk about is Pigovian welfare economics. What is Pigovian welfare economics? Pigot is a very famous economist. He says that welfare resides in this man's state of mind or conscious, which is made up of his satisfaction or utilities. That means it differs from person to person. His definition of welfare and the other person's definition of welfare would differ because it's a state of mind concept. Okay, the basic of welfare therefore is necessarily to the extent to which individual desires are met. So if all my desires are met, I would be in a good state of welfare. The other person's desires are not met, probably he would be in a bad state of welfare. So that's what Pigu says. He says that it's a state of mind. Okay, welfare is a state of mind. Pigu regard economic welfare and national income as essentially coordinate. He's saying that economic welfare and national income, both these entities should play a vital role. Okay, economic welfare is the welfare of the entire nation, and national income is the money or the total output of the entire nation. These both entities should coordinate. It is on the basis that he lays down two conditions for maximization of welfare. The first condition states that welfare is said to increase when national income increases. So Pigou clearly says that welfare will increase, okay, if the national income is going to increase given the same state. Okay, given the same tastes and income distribution, an increase in the national income represents an increase in the welfare. So there's a very direct relationship which Pigu has mentioned. Pigu says that if the income, the national income is going to increase, the welfare is going to increase. Pigu contends that in most cases the national income would increase even though the disutility of work is also increases. Increases. Okay, so in most of the cases national income will still increase, but people won't get utility from the products that they are consuming. So this is the first thing. Second, for welfare maximization, the distribution of national income is equally important. Now, however you are distributing the national income, that is equally important for welfare. First was that the direct relation between welfare and national income, and the second is how you're distributing this national income is equally important for welfare. If national income remains constant, transfer of income from rich to the poor would improve welfare. So if national income is remaining constant, then what will happen is transfer of income, which means the poor people will get more benefits. Okay, according to Pigou, such transfers means less to wealthy than to the poor. There will be equality of income, which means poor people will get more benefits. As a result, the economic positions of the later is raised. This welfare condition is based on dual Pigouin postulates of equal capacity of satisfaction and diminishing marginal utility of income. So this condition that he has created, it is dependent on the statement given by Pigou. Pigou says equal capacity for satisfaction and diminishing marginal utility of income. Okay, another thing that you need to know over here is Pigou argues that different people derive same satisfaction out of the real income, and that people now rich are different in kind from the people now poor, having their fundamental nature greater capacities for enjoyment. With income subject to diminishing marginal utility, transfer of income from rich to poor will increase social welfare by satisfying more intense wants and later the expenses of the less intense wants of the former. This is the economic equality that maximizes welfare. So, what is Pigou trying to say? Pigou is trying to say that when the rich people will transfer their income to the poor people, so the rich are already satisfied because they have sufficient money, so they are at full utilities, they are getting maximum utilities from the products and services that they're consuming, and the poor people also who do not have the sufficient money are getting money from the rich people. So what is happening here is their desires, their wants are also met, because of which they are also getting utilities. So now both the classes of people are getting highest utilities. The rich are also getting the utilities and the poor are also getting utilities. So this suffices the definition of welfare economics according to Pigou. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. In welfare economics, you have to understand what is welfare, the definition that we study, then what is the scope of welfare. Okay, what are the types of welfare? So we studied that there are three basic types: economic, non-economic, positive, normative, individual, and social. Then something that we studied was about SWF, that is social welfare function. Okay, we also saw the graph related to it, and then we studied about the Pigouin welfare economics. Pigouin welfare economics talks about the two aspects. One is national income being directly related to welfare, and second aspect that he talks about is the distribution of national income. So if you distribute the national income in such a way that you're focusing on transfer of income, that is transferring the income from the rich to the poor, then there will be welfare achieved. So this is something that you have to know. This brings us to the end of the chapter. Thank you for watching the video.